Over the last 7 weeks, the first show based on the Alien franchise, titled Alien Earth, has been receiving stellar reviews, and it caught my attention when critics compared it positively in the first week to Andor, with many noting how it doesn't just feel like an Alien prequel reliant on nostalgic callbacks to earlier entries in the series, but instead fleshes out and expands the universe of the franchise. The Alien franchise, in my opinion, has really struggled. The premise of an alien in some form finding its way upon your ship or in your station is just so good and so simple, but I'd say many entries in the series have really failed to elevate beyond that. Returning to Alien Earth, now that the show has reached the conclusion of its first season, I wanted to share some of my thoughts on how things wrapped up with the show and discuss the potential direction future seasons of the series could take us. The first thing I have to acknowledge is just how good this show looks. The budget was reportedly around $250 million across 8 episodes. For comparison, Andor Season 2 had an estimated budget of $290 million for 12 episodes. But I mean, Alien Earth is even more special effects heavy, and based on the title, I assumed setting the show on Earth was a decision made to keep the budget relatively low, but they really go out of their way to create some interesting and diverse sets and locations throughout the run. And I mean, the first episode even opens with a mini version of an Alien movie, and the special effects are just phenomenal. Something that jumps out immediately when comparing the show to most of the live-action Star Wars series is the absence of the volume. Now, I don't hate the volume. It can be used effectively and has been used effectively many times, but it can also look very artificial if used improperly. It works for close-ups, but any wide angle looks claustrophobic and limits camera movements. The biggest offender of this, of course, is Kenobi, with the practical sets and locations for Alien Earth adding a lot to the authenticity the show has. This doesn't feel like a budget version of the movies. It really fits alongside the cinematic source material nicely, which, when I heard Alien show, especially one called Alien Earth, I was imagining some sci-fi monstrosity like we probably would have gotten in the early 2000s. The titular alien of the franchise, the Xenomorph, looks just as awesome as always for most of the show. There are a few shots where it's a little more obvious that the creature is simply a guy in a suit, but they're few and far between, and you can say the same really about Aliens. I honestly think the first film is the only one which truly 100% of the time makes the alien feel like a real cosmic horror. And I do think it really, in this case, adds to the charm of the show. It would have been easier and cheaper, most likely, to exclusively use CGI, but the production team knew how important the use of a practical xenomorph was to the franchise, and this applies to all of the forms, including the facehugger and chestburster, which both look incredible. But we also have to talk about some of the other alien creatures introduced into the series, and at this point, I am going to get in some of the more spoiler-filled aspects, so if you don't want to know anything else, I recommend you watch the show, then return. Alien Earth is set 2 years before the events of the first film, which made me a little nervous because, as with any prequel material, you never want to undercut the source material, which was honestly a big source of criticism for the Ridley Scott prequel films, Prometheus and Covenant. I think Earth handles this in a smart way by making the Xenomorph just one factor in kicking off the events of the series rather than the central focus of the plot. People are turning up for more Xenomorph mayhem, and the show has tons of it, but it's simply the delivery system for showing you and making you want to focus on the other corners of this world. We are introduced to 4 other alien species. Species 19, a leech-like creature that feeds on blood, and similar to the Xenomorph, gestates within the body of another organism. We have D. Plumbicare, a carnivorous squid-like creature that moves swiftly and consumes its prey whole. Reminded me at first a lot of the barnacle from Half-Life, if you know, you know. The Fly looks and acts a whole lot like Earth-based insects, but is also capable of excreting a corrosive liquid for defensive purposes and in order to break down nutrients, which, to be fair, I'm sure some flies do in the real world, just on a smaller scale. Then, most interestingly, in my opinion, we have the Trypanohincha ocellus, which I'm just going to call the Eye. Honestly, I would have preferred if the series completely switched focus after the first 3 episodes from the Xenomorph to discovering more about the Eye, just because it was so cool and a unique twist on just the alien body horror we've come to know. It's an extremely intelligent creature whose motivations are still unknown. It kills and animates any host creature it can find, and you can see how. The last 2 episodes also hint at the Eye being able to communicate with a human host, something that was instead left off as a cliffhanger for a potential season 2. Now, my main piece of criticism revolves around the wrap-up of the season, and it's what I've been seeing online as well. To put it frankly, Season 1 of Alien Earth just did not end on a satisfying note, and this is the scourge of the 8-episode television format, in my opinion. Every episode leading up to the finale really, however, was expertly paced and was building up to a few big revelations for the franchise as a whole. One plot line I wasn't too sure about as it developed involved our main protagonist, the hybrid known as Wendy, learning how to communicate and even control the Xenomorphs. In my opinion, the Xenomorph has never appeared scarier or more threatening than in the original Alien movie. I talked about this on the channel before, but the idea of this being ripped from the depths of human psyche and fear with this weirdly sexual aspect and stranger than anything humanity has met before is a lot different than what we got in even Aliens, where they're more of an action horror horde-like creature where they might as well be the bugs from Starship Troopers. But despite this overall change as the franchise has progressed, they were still dangerous and of course motivated by survival and growing their numbers. The Xenomorphs in Alien Earth act more as a domesticated companion to a humanoid synthetic character, which does take a bit of the unpredictability and threat away. The best comparison I can think of is how the role of the Velociraptor changed in the Jurassic Park series. In the original film, there are these terrifying creatures, but in a couple movies, they're being trained and fighting alongside human characters. This isn't exactly the same. As a prototype hybrid, they explain that the ability to communicate with the Xenomorph is exclusive to Wendy, and I think there's an interesting way to continue this storyline. It's just a bit of a shame that there wasn't really a climax, and instead everything was put on hold until the show gets a second season. A second season which currently does not exist concretely yet, but it does seem very likely given the extremely positive reviews the show has received, at least until the finale. Disney is most likely waiting to see how the ratings for the show looked throughout season 1, especially given its big price tag. Despite my disappointment in the finale, I do hope we get the announcement soon. Given the way TV shows are produced, it'll probably be a minimum of 2 years before we do get an Alien Earth Season 2. Something I really haven't seen talked about is just how great the large cast of characters are, with the standouts being the cyborg Morrow, synthetic Kirsch, and the young genius Boy Cavalier. Overall, I really think Alien Earth is a bold and interesting direction to take the franchise. As much as I enjoyed the series' return with Romulus, which we just covered in a recent video by the way, I'm glad that the franchise is expanding beyond simply retreading the best moments from the first 2 films, especially the first one. While the finale didn't live up to the high bar set by the first 7 episodes, the setup for season 2 offers a lot of very exciting potential for the future of the Alien franchise, beyond simply filling in the backstory for the first film. With how much time the franchise has spent hovering around that Alien movie, I really want to see them explore more of the events after Aliens and flesh out the rest of what has turned out to be a very interesting world. But until the show is renewed, we'll just have to eagerly await what else the Alien universe has in store for us. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours down below.